The surveillance drone went silent at exactly 13:47 hours while conducting its routine sweep of Kepler 438b's northern hemisphere. This wasn't unusual. The planet had a tendency to destroy expensive equipment through creative applications of lethal wildlife, caustic atmosphere and gravity fluctuations that could turn a perfectly functional spacecraft into modern art. What was unusual was the 10 minutes of audio the drone transmitted before its untimely demise. "Is that singing?" asked Communications Officer Veltar, rewinding the recording for the third time while his tentacles performed what his species called involuntary stress patterns and everyone else called panic writhing. Captain Zek Sky of the research vessel Scientific Endeavour leaned over the audio console, listening to what sounded distinctly like a human voice humming something cheerful, while occasional roars, screeches, and sounds that probably violated several noise ordinances provided backup vocals. "That's impossible," declared Chief Xenobiologist Dr. Catherine, whose 4 decades of studying hostile environments had not prepared her for audio evidence of someone having what appeared to be a good time on the galaxy's most lethal planet. "Nothing survives on Kepler 44738b. We've sent 17 different expeditions and the longest survival time was 6 hours. "Play it again," Zexai ordered, though his voice carried the particular tone of someone who wasn't sure he wanted to hear it again. The recording crackled through the bridge speakers, filled with static from the planet's electromagnetic interference, but the human voice came through clearly, humming what sounded like an old Earth folk song, while something that was definitely not supposed to exist made friendly chirping noises in the background. Then came the part that had made Dr. Catherine request emergency sedatives. "Good morning, gorgeous," a distinctly female human voice said in cheerful English, apparently addressing something that responded with a sound like a freight train falling into a wood chipper. "Did you sleep well? I know, you're hungry. Let me get breakfast started." The recording ended with what sounded suspiciously like the sizzling of food being cooked over an open fire, accompanied by contented rumbling that suggested whatever was making the noise was very pleased with the arrangement. "How long has it been since the last expedition to Kepler 438b? Captain Zexai asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Catherine consulted her records with the expression of someone reviewing her own obituary. 3 weeks, 2 days, and approximately 14 hours. The Explorer's Pride was conducting a survey mission when they encountered severe atmospheric disturbances and requested emergency evacuation, and we evacuated the entire crew except for..." She paused, checking her manifest with growing horror. "One crew member was reported missing during the evacuation. Dr. Kate Wilson, planetary geologist. She was conducting surface research when the evacuation order came through. We assumed she didn't make it to the extraction point in time." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems and the sound of several crew members quietly updating their wills. "She's been alone on Kepler 438b for 3 weeks, Captain Zexai said slowly. "And according to this recording, she's not just alive. She's apparently running some kind of breakfast service for the local wildlife." "That's impossible," Dr. Catherine repeated, though with less conviction than before. "Well," Zexai replied, activating the ship's emergency descent protocols, "let's go find out exactly how impossible it is." The Scientific Endeavour dropped out of orbit toward Kepler 438b's surface, following the drone's last known coordinates toward whatever was producing the cheerful humming and the sounds of interspecies dining. What they found when they reached the landing coordinates redefined their understanding of the word impossible. Dr. Kate Wilson was indeed alive, sitting beside a crackling campfire in a clearing that should have been overrun with deadly vegetation. She was wearing what appeared to be handmade clothing crafted from local materials, her brown hair braided with flowers that were supposed to be lethally poisonous, and she was calmly turning what looked like roasted meat on a spit, while something the size of a small building lay curled up beside her, like an enormous scaly dog. The creature opened one massive eye as the rescue ship approached, revealing an iris that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. It made a sound like distant thunder, apparently asking a question. "That's just more visitors, Rex," Kate said without looking up from her cooking. "Be nice, they're probably here to take me home." The creature, which Dr. Kefren's database identified as a Kepler apex predator, notable for being both mythically dangerous and supposedly extinct, made a sound that could charitably be described as a disappointed whine. "I know, buddy," Kate continued, scratching behind what appeared to be an ear the size of a dinner plate. "I'll miss you too." Captain Zekai's voice crackled through the landing party's communicators. "Are we looking at a human having a conversation with something that could eat our ship?" "Yes, sir," replied Security Chief Thorne, whose combat training had not included protocols for dealing with humans who had apparently domesticated legendary monsters. Should we still attempt rescue?" But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was when Kate looked up at the approaching rescue team and called out, "Perfect timing! I was just about to serve lunch. Rex, make room by the fire. We're having company." The rescue team approached with the careful precision of beings who had trained extensively for hostile extractions but never for polite dinner invitations from someone who was supposed to be dead. Security Chief Thorne led the advance, his plasma rifle trained on the massive creature that was apparently named Rex, while Dr. Catherine followed behind with every scanner she owned beeping in electronic confusion. "Dr. Wilson," Thorne called out, his voice carrying through his suit's external speakers, "please step away from the hostile organism. We're here to extract you from this dangerous situation." Kate looked up from her cooking with the expression of someone who had just been told that breathing was a safety hazard. "Dangerous situation? I'm making lunch. Rex, stop looking at them like that. You're making our guests nervous." The creature, which according to every xenobiological database was a solitary apex predator that killed anything within a 50-kilometer radius, shifted position with a sound like grinding boulders and somehow managed to look sheepish. Its massive head, which featured enough teeth to stock a dental supply warehouse, tilted in what could only be described as an apologetic gesture. "Dr. Wilson." Dr. Catherine's voice carried the particular strain of someone whose life's work was being systematically destroyed by reality. "That organism is classified as the most dangerous predator on Kepler 438b. It's responsible for the destruction of multiple research expeditions." "Rex?" Kate laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the toxic atmosphere that she was breathing without any protective equipment. "He's a sweetheart. Aren't you, boy?" She reached up and scratched behind what appeared to be an ear, causing the creature to make a sound that was disturbingly similar to purring, if purring could be heard from orbit, and occasionally caused minor seismic events. "That's impossible," Dr. Catherine said, her scanners now displaying readings that violated several fundamental principles of biology. "Humans cannot survive in this atmosphere. The toxicity levels alone should have killed you within hours." "Ooh, that," Kate said, stirring something in a pot that smelled surprisingly appetizing. "Yeah, the air was a bit rough the first few days. Rex showed me which plants help with atmospheric adaptation. Amazing what you can learn when you actually talk to the locals." The rescue team exchanged glances that conveyed the universal sentiment of, "Did she just say she's been taking medical advice from a creature that eats spaceships?" "Dr. Wilson," Captain Zekai's voice crackled through the communicators, "our sensors indicate you've been living here without any survival equipment. How have you managed to obtain food and shelter?" Kate gestured around the clearing, which the rescue team was just beginning to notice was far more organized than any natural formation. What they had initially assumed was random vegetation was actually a carefully maintained garden. Structures that looked like natural rock formations revealed themselves to be cleverly camouflaged shelters. The entire area had been transformed into what could only be described as a homestead. "Rex helped with most of the heavy lifting," she explained, apparently oblivious to the fact that her casual friendship with a legendary predator was causing 4 different species to reconsider their understanding of the food chain. "Turns out he's incredibly good at moving large rocks, and the other locals have been very helpful too." "Other locals?" Thorne asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. As if summoned by his question, the clearing began to fill with creatures that emerged from the supposedly deadly jungle. Flying reptiles with wingspans that could shadow small towns landed on carefully constructed perches. Massive herbivores that looked like they could step on buildings wandered into the clearing with the casual confidence of animals approaching a familiar feeding station. Smaller predators that previous expeditions had classified as aggressively territorial trotted up to Kate like oversized pets seeking attention. "Everyone, meet our visitors," Kate announced to the assembled menagerie. "They're here to take me back to the ship." The response was immediate and unmistakable. Every creature in the clearing made sounds of displeasure that ranged from disappointed whines to roars that registered on the Richter scale. Rex made a particularly mournful sound and gently nudged Kate with his massive snout. I know," she said, patting what appeared to be the creature's cheek. "But they've come all this way to get me. We shouldn't be rude." Dr. Catherine was frantically updating her research notes while her scanners provided increasingly impossible data. "This violates everything we know about predator behavior. These species don't coexist. They hunt each other. They're natural enemies." "They were," Kate agreed, adding something to her cooking that made the assembled creatures perk up with interest. "But it turns out most of the territorial disputes were over resources. Once I helped establish some basic sharing protocols and set up a few common feeding areas, everybody got along much better." Security Chief Thorne noticed something that made his training protocols crash entirely. Around Rex's neck was what appeared to be a collar. Not a restraint, but a decorative band woven from local materials with careful craftsmanship. Attached to it was a tag that read, in careful English lettering, "Rex, if found, please return to Kate." "Dr. Wilson," he said slowly, Did you domesticate a Kepler apex predator?" "Domesticate?" Kate considered this, while Rex rolled over to have his belly scratched, a maneuver that involved rearranging several tons of muscle and scale with surprising grace. "I don't think that's the right word. We're more like roommates. Really good roommates who help each other out." The rescue team watched in stunned silence as Kate continued preparing what appeared to be a feast for an interspecies dinner party on a planet where nothing was supposed to survive longer than a few hours. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was when Rex carefully picked up a communication device in his massive jaws and handed it to Kate, who then said, "Oh, thanks for reminding me. I should probably call off the other rescue teams before they waste fuel getting here." What happened next made galactic history, and not in a good way. The communication device that Rex had so helpfully retrieved turned out to be a modified emergency transmitter that had been jury-rigged into something resembling a planetary communication network. Kate activated it with the casual ease of someone turning on a kitchen appliance, and suddenly the rescue team's scanners were picking up signals from across the entire northern hemisphere. "Kate's at Base Camp 7, she said into the device. "We've got visitors from the rescue ship. Cancel the evening patrol. Rex and I will handle the meet and greet." The response came back immediately in what sounded like a coordinated chorus of roars, chirps, and sounds that registered on equipment designed to detect seismic activity. Kate listened to this cacophony with the expression of someone receiving a perfectly normal status report. "Base Camp 7? Dr. Catherine asked, her voice carrying the particular strain of someone whose scientific worldview was being systematically demolished by reality. "How many base camps are there?" 17 so far, Kate replied, apparently oblivious to the fact that she had just claimed to have established a civilization on a planet where nothing was supposed to survive. "We started with just the clearing here, but once word got around that someone was organizing the food distribution system, everybody wanted to participate." She gestured toward a ridge that the rescue team was just beginning to notice was covered with structures that looked organic but were clearly artificial. "The flying scouts have been incredibly helpful with surveying new territory. The herbivores are amazing at land cultivation, and the predators provide security and heavy lifting." Captain Zex High's voice crackled through the communicators with the particular tone of someone whose rescue mission had become a first contact protocol. "Dr. Wilson, are you telling us you've established a functioning society with the indigenous wildlife?" "Society might be too strong a word," Kate said, stirring her cooking while Rex made what appeared to be satisfied rumbling sounds. "It's more like efficient resource management with enthusiastic local participation." Security Chief Thorne was reviewing his scanner data with the expression of someone trying to understand a joke that might kill him. "Our sensors are detecting organized activity across 1,200 square kilometers. That's not resource management, that's territorial expansion." "Well, yes," Kate agreed, as if this was perfectly obvious. You can't run an effective ecosystem management program from just one location. The seasonal migration patterns alone require coordination across multiple climate zones. The rescue team exchanged glances that conveyed the universal sentiment of, "Did she just say she's been managing an entire ecosystem like a business?" Dr. Catherine's scanners were now providing readings that violated fundamental principles of ecology. "This is impossible. Kepler-4 8b has one of the most unstable ecosystems in the galaxy. The species here are locked in perpetual territorial conflicts that maintain population balance through mutual destruction." "We're locked in territorial conflicts," Kate corrected, apparently not noticing that her casual past-tense reference to planetary warfare was causing several members of the rescue team to experience what their respective species called existential dread. Turns out most of the fighting was over resource scarcity and territorial boundaries. Once we established some basic sharing protocols and set up neutral zones for common resources, the conflict resolution became much more straightforward. Rex made a sound that was apparently commentary on this statement because Kate nodded and said, "Rex makes a good point. The initial negotiations were challenging because nobody spoke the same language, but once we worked out basic communication protocols, most of the territorial disputes resolved themselves." "Communication protocols?" Thorne asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Kate pulled out what appeared to be a handmade notebook, filled with detailed charts, diagrams, and what looked suspiciously like linguistic analysis. "It took about a week to work out the basic grammar structures. Most of the predator species use sound-based communication with hierarchical tonal patterns. The herbivores favor scent marking combined with positional displays. The aerial species use a complex combination of flight patterns and electromagnetic field manipulation." She flipped through pages of notes that would have impressed xenolinguistic researchers across the galaxy. "Once you understand the basic communication framework, establishing resource-sharing agreements becomes a fairly straightforward diplomatic process." Dr. Catherine was now holding her scanner with the expression of someone whose equipment had begun providing readings that challenged the basic laws of physics. "Dr. Wilson, our sensors indicate that you've somehow achieved ecological balance on a planet that's been locked in destructive cycles for millions of years." "It wasn't that hard," Kate said, adding seasoning to her cooking with the casual confidence of someone who had apparently revolutionized planetary ecology as a hobby. "Most ecosystems are naturally inclined toward balance. They just need someone to facilitate communication between the different stakeholder groups." The rescue team watched in stunned silence as creatures that were supposed to be locked in eternal warfare shared food around Kate's campfire with the casual cooperation of old friends. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part came when Kate's communication device activated again, and a new voice spoke, not human, but using carefully pronounced English words. "Kate friend," the voice said, accompanied by what sounded like multiple speakers providing harmonic backup. "The Southern Territories report successful harvest completion. The migration routes are clear for winter season preparation." Kate smiled and responded in what appeared to be fluent predator speak, a combination of sounds that made the rescue team's audio equipment emit warning signals. "Thank you for the update," she said, switching back to English. "Please remind everyone that we have guests today, so postpone the territorial expansion planning until tomorrow." The response came back as a coordinated chorus from 17 different locations across the hemisphere, all confirming what sounded like complex logistical arrangements. Dr. Catherine was now openly staring at her scanner readings with the expression of someone whose life's work had been replaced by a 3-week camping trip. "Dr. Wilson," she said slowly, "how many species are participating in your resource management system?" Kate consulted her notebook with the casual manner of someone checking their grocery list. "All of them, I think. We started with just the immediate area, but once word spread about the efficiency improvements, everybody wanted to join. The latest count was 47 different species groups, but that was before the Deep Territory Scouts made contact with the underground networks." Security Chief Thorne activated his emergency protocols with the expression of someone whose rescue mission had become a diplomatic crisis. "Captain, we need immediate consultation with the Galactic Ecology Council. Dr. Wilson hasn't just survived on Kepler 438b, she's accidentally conquered it." The alarms weren't coming from the rescue ship. They were coming from the Galactic Ecology Council's emergency monitoring station, which had been tracking the conversation through the ship's communications system and was now broadcasting what could only be described as scientific panic across 17 different star systems. "This is Dr. Velanash of the Galactic Ecology Council." A voice crackled through the communicators with the particular strain of someone whose entire academic field was being redefined by a camping trip. "We need immediate clarification on the reported ecological modifications to Kepler 438b. Kate looked up from her cooking with the expression of someone who had just been asked to explain why water was wet. "Modifications? I wouldn't call them modifications, more like organizational improvements. Dr. Wilson." Dr. Velanash's voice carried the weight of someone whose 40-year career was dissolving in real time. "Our sensors are detecting coordinated behavior patterns across an entire planetary ecosystem. That's not organization. That's domestication on a scale that shouldn't be possible." "Domestication seems like the wrong word," Kate said, scratching Rex behind the ear while he made contented rumbling sounds that registered on seismic equipment 3 continents away. "We're more like collaborative partners in a mutually beneficial resource management system." Dr. Catherine was now openly staring at her scanner with the expression of someone whose equipment had begun providing readings that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. "Dr. Wilson, could you explain your methodology for establishing interspecies communication protocols?" "Well, that's easy," Kate said, pulling out her notebook and flipping to a section that looked like it had been written by someone who had accidentally invented an entire academic discipline. "You just have to remember that every species has the same basic needs: food, shelter, security, and social interaction. Once you establish common ground around those universal requirements, the communication barriers become much easier to overcome." She showed them a page covered with detailed diagrams that illustrated what appeared to be a comprehensive xenolinguistic framework developed through practical application rather than theoretical study. "The key is to approach each species as individuals rather than representatives of their biological classification. Rex, here for example, isn't just an apex predator. He's a highly intelligent individual with specific preferences, social needs, and communication patterns." Rex made a sound that was apparently commentary on this statement, because Kate nodded and said, "Rex points out that the traditional classification system doesn't account for individual personality variations within species groups." The rescue team exchanged glances that conveyed the universal sentiment of, did a legendary monster just provide academic criticism of galactic xenobiological methodology? Furthermore, Kate continued, apparently warming to her theme, the assumption that predator species are inherently aggressive ignores the fact that aggression is typically a response to resource scarcity or territorial insecurity. Once those underlying issues are addressed through collaborative resource management, most species default to cooperative behavior patterns. But the real revelation came when Kate activated her communication device and demonstrated what she called standard diplomatic protocol. "Kate, to all territorial coordinators," she said, speaking in what appeared to be fluent multi-species communication. "We have academic observers from the Galactic Ecology Council. Please prepare standard demonstration of cooperative resource management." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the clearing, creatures began arriving in organized groups, each species bringing examples of their contributions to the collective ecosystem. Flying scouts delivered detailed territorial maps created through aerial surveillance. Herbivore teams presented samples of cultivated vegetation that had been modified for improved nutritional content. Predator groups demonstrated security protocols and coordinated hunting techniques that maximized efficiency while minimizing ecological disruption. "This is impossible," Dr. Catherine whispered, watching a presentation that would have impressed the most advanced xenobiological research teams in the galaxy. "They're demonstrating advanced ecological management techniques that our best scientists haven't even theorized yet." "They're not demonstrating anything," Kate replied, apparently missing the point that she had just facilitated the most sophisticated interspecies cooperation in galactic history. "They're just showing you how things work when everybody communicates effectively and shares resources intelligently." The demonstration continued for 2 hours, with each species group presenting their role in what Kate casually referred to as basic ecosystem maintenance. The rescue team watched in stunned silence as creatures that were supposed to be locked in evolutionary warfare collaborated on projects that would have challenged the most advanced technological civilization. The most shocking moment came when one of the smaller predators approached Dr. Catherine directly and began what could only be described as an attempt at scientific discourse. Using a combination of sounds, gestures, and what appeared to be crude drawings in the dirt, the creature was clearly trying to explain something about local mineral deposits and their relationship to plant growth patterns. "I think she's trying to tell you about the soil chemistry," Kate translated, apparently as comfortable with interspecies scientific collaboration as she was with everything else about her impossible situation. The underground networks have been doing some fascinating work with mineral distribution and its effects on surface vegetation. Dr. Catherine stared at the creature, then at the detailed soil analysis it had sketched in the dirt, then back at Kate. "Jed Wilson, this creature is conducting peer review of our geological survey methods." "Well, yes," Kate replied, as if this was perfectly normal. "They've been living here for thousands of years. They know things about the planet that we've never even thought to study." Dr. Velnesh's voice crackled through the communicators with the particular desperation of someone whose life's work was being casually demolished by practical experience. "Dr. Wilson, are you suggesting that hostile ecosystem behavior is primarily a resource management problem?" "Not suggesting," Kate replied, adding something to her cooking that made the assembled creatures perk up with anticipation. "Demonstrating. The proof is all around you." She gestured toward the clearing, where creatures that were supposed to be locked in evolutionary warfare were sharing food, coordinating activities, and engaging in what could only be described as social interaction across species boundaries. The traditional approach to Death World classification assumes that hostile environments are inherently unsurvivable, Kate explained, apparently oblivious to the fact that her casual academic analysis was causing multiple species to reconsider their understanding of planetary ecology. But most death worlds aren't actually hostile. They're just poorly managed. Captain Zekskai's voice carried the particular strain of someone whose rescue mission had become a diplomatic crisis. "Dr. Wilson, the Galactic Ecology Council is requesting immediate evacuation and quarantine protocols. Your improvements to Kepler 438b may have created an unstable ecological situation." "Unstable?" Kate laughed, and the sound was accompanied by what appeared to be agreeable rumbling from every creature in the clearing. "This is the most stable ecosystem in the galaxy. We've eliminated resource conflicts, established sustainable population management, and created collaborative frameworks for territorial expansion." She consulted her notebook with the casual manner of someone checking their calendar. "Productivity is up 400%, territorial conflicts are down to 0, and we've established peaceful contact with underground networks that previous expeditions never even detected." The rescue team's communication system activated with an emergency priority signal that made their equipment emit sounds of electronic distress. "This is the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Society," announced a voice that carried the authority of someone whose job was to prevent exactly this kind of situation. "We're issuing an emergency complaint regarding unauthorized ecological intervention on a protected death world." Kate looked genuinely confused. Protected? By whom? The creatures here never agreed to any protection protocols. In fact, they're pretty frustrated about being classified as wildlife when they're clearly intelligent beings with complex social structures. Rex made a sound that was apparently supportive commentary because Kate nodded and said, "Rex makes a good point. The protection classification was imposed without consulting the actual inhabitants of the planet." The implications of this statement rippled through the communication network like a particularly virulent form of bureaucratic plague. If the creatures on Kepler 4.38b were intelligent beings rather than wildlife, then centuries of Death World classification had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the planet's actual nature. "Dr. Wilson," Dr. Velenash's voice carried the weight of someone whose entire academic field was being redefined by a 3-week camping trip, "are you suggesting that Kepler 448b is inhabited by intelligent species rather than hostile wildlife?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Kate replied, stirring her cooking, while Rex and his companions made what appeared to be agreeable sounds. I'm stating it as observable fact. These are intelligent beings with complex social structures, communication systems, and collaborative problem-solving capabilities. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of multiple governmental agencies quietly updating their classification systems. 3 months later, Kepler 4438b received its official reclassification from Death World, avoid at all costs, to Human Territory, approach with caution and possibly treats. Kate Wilson was appointed as the planet's first interspecies diplomatic coordinator, a position that didn't exist until she created it through practical application of what she called basic common sense and adequate snack preparation. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the final entry in the galactic database. Note: all future Death World classifications will include mandatory consultation with local inhabitants to determine if hostile environment is due to actual danger or simply poor resource management. The woman who turned the galaxy's deadliest planet into a functioning civilization just got promoted to Chief Interspecies Friendship Coordinator by creatures that were supposed to be mythically dangerous. And somewhere in the galaxy, 17 different species quietly filed applications to establish diplomatic relations with the new civilization on Kepler 4.38b.